Hello and welcome back to another lesson in class. Now, this one will go out to any fans of NCIS with Gibbs, so on and so forth. And the reason why is because Gibbs always had these rules. And, he had Rule 44, he had Rule 20, whatever, so on and so forth, and all these rules. And I remember there's a clip of Denozo, and he's like, what is all those like rules that they teach you in the Marines and stuff? He goes, what are you talking about? But for some reason, Gibbs knew something or understood something that others didn't for some reason, because obviously you have to have diversification when it comes to communication. So lesson 44, right? Just like rule 44, which meant hide the children, so on and so forth, etc., right? It was speaking in code. So the title for this will be The Belief and Magic of Spirituality. Now, I know this might ruffle some feathers, but I really don't care, right? Why? Because of, well, if you've seen past lessons, other videos, and things that I discuss, then you would understand how we got to this point, right? So, first point, what is belief and why is it so powerful? Well, belief will fall underneath the category of, let's say, ideology, right? What do you idolize? What do you cherish? What do you hold or deem as valuable, but that which you cannot see, so that it's invisible and in the mind, right? So, people always need justifications, but then again, that also requires an understanding. But once you have understanding, like Bruce Lee once said, first it becomes one thing, then another, then it becomes the gospel truth, right? But what if things were said or done differently? Which leads me to my next point. What and why is magic interesting? See, what's interesting about magic is, well, first we have to understand that magic is essentially science, right? What is magic? It's science performed very well, right? In a stage-like presentation, right? But that comes with a lot of things, right? Because if you were to take the iPhone back, let's say 75 years, and show somebody what it was, right? Or say, we're going to be talking through stuff like this in the future, people would say you were off your rocker, right? And then, of course, it would only happen and come to fruition years later. And then you could go, aha, I told you, right? Or in Spanish, they like to say, te lo dije, right? And then, of course, why is it interesting? Well, think about it like this. And I have always had teachers ask me certain questions, such as, why did you do good in physics, but then your math grades sucked? Well, because physics came not only with a story, but a purpose for the numbers and the letters and the symbols to acquire, something or a product at the end factor, right? Once you put everything together. Whereas in math class, right, it was very logical and numbers just added up to more numbers. There was no purpose behind the numbers, right? And it's just like that with, well, belief, magic, spirituality, and anything else, right? Because one has something more tied to it than just the logical understanding and logical justifications, right? Because it has creativity, logic, and then it has the artistic presence because of the way it's delivered. And then, of course, science because of, well, let's say technology and everything else that may be undescribed by science, right? Which is indistinguishable from magic. So when it's presented and tied a certain way, well, then you were to also perceive it a certain way, right? Making a round robin back to earlier videos in creativity. I'm pretty sure that's lesson 1, right? Perception and perspective and things like that. Point 3. Now, how does this integrate with spirituality? Well, I think we tapped on it a little bit, right? Because, think about it. If somebody was going around healing people, without a license, they would get arrested, right? Because they would be practicing medicine without a license. And so they would find a way or a justification to arrest somebody, even though they're doing the right thing, right? But then again, you have a license to drive, and that puts the lives of everyone else around you, including yourself, at risk. So let me get this straight. You can't practice medicine or help heal people without a license, but you can drive a vehicle that can certainly kill people with one. And they'll give it out to everybody starting at 18, 16 years old. Does that make sense? It doesn't, right? When you put it in that perspective, when you set it up that way, right? Let's do a mic check real quick. All right. So if you're getting anything out of this, go ahead and subscribe or hit that like button and please share. But the way this also integrates is, well, I mean, think about it. What do you have faith in, right? Because if your faith is in scratch offs, then you're probably just gambling, and you shouldn't gamble, right? If you think outside of the box, right? Let's say with spirituality, people will ask me about these beads that I wear, right? And then I would ask them, have you ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean and Jack Sparrow drove the Black Pearl? Well, what's interesting is that what if these were black pearls but meant to look as something different? Would this be perceived as more valuable because of what you now know it is? Or was it always valuable, etc.? Right? And it would be an easy way to transport wealth as an asset figure as well, because of the pearl's value in comparison to beads, right? And that would come down to a variety of things, and they'd say, oh yeah, no, these are just my spiritual beads, etc. And then your brain would register that, and now you have spiritual beads. You can sell them for $5, etc. And then they find out that they're holding a bunch of black pearls, which you can look up the value of those. So you have to understand, not only within that story, I also integrated fantasy from Disney movies, right, in order to get my point across as a metaphor, analogy, entendre. But remember, in the earlier videos, we discussed creativity. It was the first thing in class, which meant you understood how to also think outside of the box, right? They say the box with the 9 dots or whatever, and you have to connect everything. It's funny that the grid on the iPhone is 9 squares, right? Anyways, point number 4. What if spirituality is one long continuous story that builds on top of the last? And that's why we should coexist. You've seen those coexist bumper stickers out there, and it has all the different symbols and things like that. It's it's interesting and funny, because if you do read all the books without fear stopping you from reading all of the books, like a Harry Potter series or Narnia or Sherlock Holmes series or, I don't know, Dr. Seuss, whatever the case may be, then you would see why one of the things that's said multiple times is don't fear, but then people use fear. Don't do this, and then they use it as a weapon. I think love is the number one thing said the most times in one of them, and yet they utilize that as a manipulation tool, deception tool, tool of influence, depending on how one needs to be motivated, right? Because they play with the heart. Now, when it comes to that, I mean, think about it. In an earlier set, it says one certain type of things, right? Whether that is Hermetic principles or going into Hinduism or whatever the case. But if you notice, as medicine advances, so do other things that get pointed out within the spiritual context, also start to seem more real, right? So let me get this straight. You guys will believe that dinosaurs were here, they got destroyed, etc. But you don't believe like a flood or something could happen. Okay, interesting. Who was ever stationed in Okinawa, Japan? Any of my friends that are Marines out there? Then you know about tsunami parties, right? So, I mean, think about it, right? There are things that can be explained, there are other things that cannot, and there are how do I say this? Oh, the Boondocks, right? The cartoon that everybody likes, right? There are known knowns, there are unknown unknowns, right? Or no, there are unknown knowns. And then the question was, but are there unknown unknowns? Something like that. It was very interesting, but you can go ahead on YouTube, look up Boondocks, and put in unknowns known, and you'll understand what I was trying to say there. So, moving on with point number 5. If magic helps people understand what is possible, then why has it disappeared? Now, granted, when I wrote my notes and everything like that, I knew that certain things were going to happen, as far as like, oh, now you see me, now you don't, is coming out, this, that, and the third. But I actually held on to this for a minute because I think I wrote this on the 14th. And so, I saw the movie and I was like, oh, they're bringing magic back. This is going to be amazing, right? And anybody that's a techie out there, you may have heard of Marco Tempus, so on and so forth. I think that's how you enunciate his name. But there's people like him, and then of course you watch Now You See Me, Now You Don't. Then you have the CES conference where they show futuristic technology and things like that, and leave it to a creative individual that wants to, do whatever in that field with that technology. Well, it'll look like magic if it looks and performed correctly. Now, if you say it's a futuristic tool, remember the analogy of the cell phone, right? And then the comparison to practicing medicine without a license that will put you in jail or whatever the case, right? Because you're messing with people's you're messing with their money, right? Because if you solve the problem for them, right? Because they cheat off the kid or whatever, so on and so forth, like in Grease 2, they cheat off Michael, so on and so forth, but he's trying to put money aside so he could fit in with the cool kids and get a motorcycle and all this other stuff. I'm not trying to get a motorcycle, it's an analogy, and the actor's name or the character's name is Michael in Grease before anybody loses their freaking cow. So think about it like that, right? And then, of course, you have stuff with these deep fake videos and all that. But you got to remember something. We had the Jetsons at one point. If you don't know what the Jetsons and the Flintstones are, there's a freaking movie where they meet and their minds get blown. So it's one of those things where could you possibly believe something, or do you actually have to have it right in your face? Do you need to have extreme amount of proof? Do you need to, how far are you willing to go? I got to the point where I have to stop saying that because, well, I've learned that people will go extremely far until they get their hands too dirty, and then it's too late to back up because everything's been recorded, right? So it's very interesting when that happens, right? It's the same thing. Can you believe that something is called air or wind, etc.? Why? Can you feel it? And it was described to you as such before you get upset, right? Watch those BPMs, beats per minute, right? Heart rate. Anyways, moving on. If belief is a motivator for people to keep going, why is it sometimes used as a weapon? Right? And I touched on this earlier, but seriously, why is it used as a weapon, right? Because if you utilize it correctly, you could get people to do a bunch of stuff, right? But then again, if you come up short and you try to say it's a lesson or this, that, and the third, and you don't believe in karma as you're preaching or speaking from a spiritual perspective to a mass of people that actually matter to some people, right? Then seriously, why are you using it as a weapon? And if you're trying to play chess, don't do that. Especially if you're not willing to step on the front line, right? Many people will talk about the game of chess, but no one ever questioned why in checkers all the pieces are at play. And in chess, There's certain pieces that move a certain way, ones that are extremely slow, like the king that could only move one spot at a time, just like a pawn, etc. So therefore, what if the pawns are, let's say, the children of those that they stand before, etc., or their firstborn, because it's a game of chess, right? And there's probably male and female on each side, so there's two knights, two bishops, two rooks, etc., but one queen, one king, and then on the other side same thing. And then of course you have the offspring, which would be the pawns, and if they reach the other side by following direction or proper guidance, they will manage to maneuver away from harm, or not be harmed but defeat it themselves, make it to the other side and make something of themselves. Similar to the movie A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. But if things are utilized as a weapon, well then you're now playing a extremely dangerous game, because of the amount of people that actually rely on that for certain reasons. If both are for all, then why are both truly hidden from the world? So let's touch upon healing people, right? Well, you can't do that. Why? You don't have a license. Okay, well, how much does that cost? Oh, boatloads. About, the down payment to a house, or at least a quarter of it, give or take, for medical school. Not just your bachelor's, but medical school, so yada yada, right? Oh, okay. And then how long is it going to take for me to pay that back? Oh, not that long, but you can do other stuff to make money because you want to be a good doctor, right? Okay, cool. You might want to prescribe this because might make a small commission, right? Not to say that that happens or kickbacks don't ever happen, but come on. I said that once to somebody, hoping that they would freaking understand what I was saying, but it took close to 5 years for them to even get it. And then one of them, huh, huh, huh. Not only did they fabricate stuff, I had a friend of mine, he actually designed these playing cards here. And he told me that somebody down the street from a place that he used to be at was messing with one of his son's friends. And I looked at him and I said, where are they? Right? Who are they? And I understood what he was saying, but in the moment wanted to see if, as a friend of ours, Caleb would say, if he would care to go further and truly say it out loud. So after I picked up on what he was laying down, things got a little bit more personal. So, needless to say, he's a magician. That's why I'm talking about magic. And then, of course, I talked about now you see me, now you don't. And then I, tied in spirituality because obviously in other videos I mentioned that I almost became a priest at one point. Crazy, I know, but very true. So it was very interesting when I started to hear certain things, but I started to make connections in different ways, right? Because if I could take something and utilize it as a weapon, right? Well, then from a military perspective, because you saw, well, my cover or my hat says vet gang, right? So what's a firing squad, right? So a fire squad is like, what, 4 or 5 people. I also confirmed this not only with friends, but went into ChatGPT and Gemini, and it confirmed the other stuff, just like the messing with people's finances if you go around healing people, right? And then, of course, well, if that's 4 to 5 people, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all talk about Jesus. So he's a healer. In other words, he's a doc. You don't want to mess with the doc, right? Because he heals everybody, right? So there's your 5-man squad. They can get a lot done. Last time I checked, they have a lot of references somewhere, right? And then, of course, they all have their different personalities because you have the disc profile. And we all know that the apostles and disciples, however you refer to them, they had their own, right? Like the seasons. So let me ask you a question. If you see unknown medical treatment, what would you call it? All right. If you were to see unknown medical treatment, what would you call it? Would you say it's a miracle or advanced science? I mean, we have CRISPR technology now that reprograms DNA. So, I mean, Google that first before you make judgments, right? So, I mean, think about it, right? If they could get rid of it, why don't they? And if they can, why do they make it so expensive? And I'll get into that in a moment. So, would you deem a miracle magic or unexplained science? Remember in the movie Thor, where they asked him certain things, right? Because also you got to remember the lore that resides within there, right? Because if each story builds upon one another, then you have to see how it connects before you respond. In other words, you have to try to understand instead of just trying to respond out of, well, emotion. So, if so, would this not interfere with the money flow into a company that makes money off of people who believe they should suffer or whatever the case? Right? If someone did come back, do you think history would not repeat because money, power, and control? So, let's go ahead and open this up for either debate or whatever. Right? Would you rather have someone that just treats symptoms or actually solves a problem, right? And then they believe you should suffer, which means your body should fight back a little bit. So they'll let you, try to fight back, just like giving you antivirus or whatever, right? And it's magical because they came up with a cure or some type of antidote in less than a year, but yet they can't figure out, for the love of God, cures for anything else, right? But when you look at the numbers make sense to the profit line, so who cares? So what is an ist that would do so, right? Or an IST, right? IST. Is it a psychiatrist, right? Because that ends with an ist. Is a proctologist, right? Etc. Is it someone who has that in their title, right? And then, of course, if they have a license, shouldn't they be diligent at their job just as us on a road driving behind a four-wheel car? I don't know. They expect us to, pay something up when they mess up, but seems just that, when you speak to an attorney and you say, hey, this hospital did X, Y, and Z, all of a sudden, let's just say I wish I was able to speak to Harvey Specter or a JAG officer at this point. So it's very interesting, but some people are delusional at times. And then, of course, when you play the playback for them, whether it's recorded or not, and then they try to use fear because, well, they're recording their notes, and fair is fair since we're in a 50-50 thing, since we have 50 states. I'll let you figure that out. Adds up to 250 if you count all the points. Semper Fi, do or die Marine Corps. Happy birthday, gentlemen. So let's continue. If what was being healed, right? If what was being used to heal people, then are not doctors that share the ist do the same? Okay, so let's reread this, right? If what was being healed, all right, and shared at the same time, right? Because in other videos I talked about other things, right? But if things were being shared at the same time, then people would know whom to speak to, whom would help, whom would be a slightly bent, etc., and do something retarded. And then, of course, how they would explain the cover up, right? And then, of course, covering everything up requires communication in some fashion. So you just have to, well, not only follow the money, but, well, follow the communication patterns that manage to change. It's so weird, right? And in other videos, I have discussed this. So let me get this straight. If the books in spirituality were meant to heal people or help, and it's also written in code, metaphor, analogy, and entendre, why is it used as a weapon? Same thing with doctors and the healthcare community. If you're supposed to heal people, why are you also harming people? And don't say because we have to make sacrifices for the greater good BS, especially with the amount of technology that is out there, and you and I both know there is a lot of it, right? So ask the critical question, why do we pay people so much if they can't cure but treat signs, right? Signs, right? SIGNS, right? Or sign, SIN in mathematics, right? If they can't do their job, why do they still expect to be paid for the lack of not only due diligence, but, well, not having understanding and being lazy, as a woman once was told trying to get on Marine Corps base Quantico one time, and she was just playing dumb for some reason. But she got told that by a civilian, and it was hilarious. So let's continue. Why is healthy food more expensive, but the food that does harm so cheap? I mean, that's weird, right? Why is the food that does the most harm so cheap, but the food that is apparently healthy and good for you so expensive, right? Now, the reason why I also bring this up is now, after watching the movie Now You See Me, Now You Don't, there's a uh, line in the movie, a couple lines in the movie, but it talks about the great con of the diamond industry or the jewelry industry, right? And then the belief that they tied to it, that you can't get married without a diamond ring, so on and so forth, right? And I've always, well, believed that as well. I'm like, this is a story that made a rock that's polished and shaped a certain way worth thousands of dollars. Interesting. Wow. Just saying. So, I mean, water's cheap and fire's free in hell, but I mean, come on. You can't get married, jump the broom, do something else. You need a diamond ring? And I was just like, this movie's genius, right? Just called out so many things, right? Because then you start to learn what matters, right? Now, if that diamond ring was also being utilized like the black pearl analogy, right, then that would be something that's, well, different, and that would also tie to a dowry, which used to be paid for a bride, right? I don't know if you saw that connection or whatever, but what does this have to do with the good food and the bad food, etc.? Do you need a rock that costs thousands of dollars to have something that brings you joy and everything else in life, so on and so forth, that also can reproduce or share a life with, moving forward, that not only brings you joy, happiness, but someone that you can lean on at times, so on and so forth? Is that not more valuable than a rock that's cheap, etc.? Because, I mean, think about it. You have to sacrifice time, energy, and attention to afford it, right? So therefore, you have emotional ties to it as well. So if it gets thrown back or whatever the case, it's heart-wrenching, right? Like a McDonald's cheeseburger. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think I might stop there, even though it's bad for you, right? But it's cheap and it lasts long. Interesting. But if you eat too much of it, it's going to do some damage, right? And then you have like Five Guys or steak, right? Or chicken, right? Or you can eat some breakfast for dinner. It's up to you. That's cheap, somewhat healthy, right? But then, of course, like the organic stuff, this is where the story comes in, right? The organic, right? Or cage free, right? Or whatever. No antibiotics in this one, right? Why does this one look so small? Because they weren't shooting it up with steroids to make it bigger. That's called genetic modification, all right? So people are okay with understanding that and the use of steroids, but they're scared to look up CRISPR technology and understand that and then see why and ask certain questions. So if you are trusted and do good with a little, then you will be given much, which is not fucking true, right? because people will use this and then they'll pertain it to like money or resources or whatever, right? But let's think about the comment and the phrase, how it could be used. If you are trusted and do good with a little, then you will be given much, which is not true. See, I said not true in pertaining to money. See, because if you are good and you are trusted with a little one, right? A small individual, right? Another human being, right? And you do good there, you will be given much more, right? If you're a grandpa out there or grandparents, etc., how much love do you feel around this time? Because we're getting close to Christmas when the family gets together, depending on your situation, in comparison to those that have not yet had that experience that they can share with each other. That's more valuable than the financial way that it gets positioned. Yes or yes? So you have to look at things from a different perspective sometimes, because if you get stuck, well, then you're never going to move forward and you'll get emotional because you'll be stuck on certain things that you don't want to let go. Let go, right? Let go. Open your mind, as one said in the movie Doctor Strange. So, what exactly does that pertain to? We went into that, right? And then, of course, have you ever thought about that critically? We tapped on that as well. Because of the way it's looked at, right? In certain songs, it talks about 3-3, or I'll take two number threes. That's a Justin Timberlake song, right? But if you study other things and you understand the ways of communication, well, 33 is water. 32 would be ice because it's a freezing point. But ice is solid, or pleading the fifth, ice doesn't move, right? It's frozen. But 33 can flow. Hence why it's also in music, right? Because when you speak or sing or rap or perform hip hop, you're flowing, right? People in personal growth circles will call this your flow state, similar to people within a cipher, right? So on and so forth. So if history repeats and the future is hidden, then to have a better future, study the past, then you would be able to see certain things, right? This would be known as not just pattern recognition, but other things as well, right? Imagine if somebody went around with not just ChatGPT, but having access to like library and technology and internet stuff, was able to conduct research and found out that, hey, you can fix certain things without X, Y, and Z or certain side effects, right? You think that person would get in trouble? Probably. One, because they don't have a license, right? Two, well, because you're messing with people's money now. Three, well, if you solve the problem, more money can't flow in, and that's an issue. So they have to keep causing problems in order to continue filling their pockets, etc., instead of putting to use, what it is that they learned. And not to say all of them are bad. However, there were a few that literally, whew, they need to go back to school. They need to go back to school. So, I mean, think about this. If you're also in a situation where you're doing investments, right? History repeats itself. So when you study finances, they tell you to do a look back of 3 to 5 years. You also do this in audits, etc., because after 7 years, right? And that's funny because that's in certain books and spirituality as well, right? Especially when it comes to things like bankruptcy. How funny how the numbers tie together. But in 7 years, the statute of limitations also happens for certain individuals, which is why I'm guessing we're now heading into year 6. And so this is why I have to move faster instead of slow down. So if you're helping or assisting, well, then I need you to speed up before statute of limitations hits. And then, well, everybody's doing their own thing and we're back to the same old crap, and the cycle will repeat because history repeats itself, right? Haven't you noticed in finance circles they talk about a correction happening every 10 to 20 years, give or take, or maybe sometimes 2 to 3 decades, depending? It's interesting, but a correction is another way of stating the same thing, right? Because they see the pattern, because history repeats itself. So if you do a 5, 3, or 10-year look back on a stock portfolio or something else, someone's life, their analytical behavior, you can then also pick and point out certain patterns. It's the things that scare people. And the one thing that really scares people is when those patterns are inconsistent. When those patterns are inconsistent, they get scared because someone might be doing something that doesn't go along with whatever it is they're trying to do. And then, of course, if they're trying to control something, well, how is this happening, right? Why isn't this person or individual following or doing the same thing? Most people follow routine. This one is getting, changed up every once in a while. I'm going to keep a closer eye on this. If you understand things from that perspective, go ahead and smash the like button, hit share, or, well, subscribe. Tell me what you think so far, right? So let's continue. If belief was not the magic of business, then Christmas wouldn't exist unless that secret is not important, true or false. So being that we are, in the time frame of, well, November, December, which in America we celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas and the holidays and other things as well. Let me put these back on. It's interesting because I stated if belief was not the magic of business, and what happens during this time of the year, the belief in Santa, understanding what the children actually want for Christmas, right? So you listen through a third party, right? Some people would say, oh, this is paganism. Other people would call it tradecraft. Some people would call it pre-show or magic displayed perfectly. And then, of course, others would be utilizing this as something else and just trying to say what it is or what it isn't, right? But marketers would actually utilize the story to not only tie certain things together, but to take advantage of the time in which people are being asked what they want. Hence why there's so many commercials also around this particular time of certain things that people stated that they wanted, right? And of course, if you have a cell phone or whatever the case, you start talking about something, all of a sudden you see a advertisement for it, right? So I mean, think about that, right? Does Christmas matter? Does spending time around the family matter? Does the stories that we share that keep each other alive at times, because it's the experiences that we share moments of on social media that we either do or don't pretend to have? Whether you're trying to be an influencer or not, or whether you're trying to get a point across, whether you're heard or you're not. Who's and what's the real one out there? Are you trying to be in the spotlight and, do something else? Do you care to go further? But if you know as much as I do, or, then I should have just been picking up on you wanted me to go further and throw everything out there. But because I remained quiet or silent, right, at the time, I stated no, but you agreed with my answer. So we can leave it there. And I'm glad you won. Anyways, if there are no need for secrets because those with leverage, resources, and a network share everything, then let's share because fair is fair, right? So I once mentioned this to a bartender. I said, fair is fair, right? And she's like, fair is fair. Yeah, you do whatever you want. I get to do whatever I want. We have an understanding, etc. Blah, 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 blah. And then it's like the saying, or how I say history repeats itself, inch, mile taken, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, how far is this going to go? And as I said earlier, I learned to stop saying that because it could always go further. And, well, let's not have it go there. Right? So, because people are crazy, right? If they're using people like guinea pigs and playing scientists instead of actually curing and solving things, I mean, come on, what else are they doing, right? What matters, right? Because I did talk about Christmas, right? I mean, think about it. During Thanksgiving, I lost my grandmother. I was probably blasting music and crying in my car, so on and so forth. The people around me thought I was something else, but I guess they were only informed to a certain degree because why? Leaving out that my grandmother, who helped raise me, passed away, and the doctor said the reason why they didn't help her, allegedly, was because she ran out of money. Weird. She ran out of a way to pay them, so they stopped treating her. Interesting. So why do we pay them so much again? It's a question that I've been wondering for a minute. And what happened to like apprenticeships and things like this? You now have to go to school? I mean, come on. I mean, how did people learn back in the day? So, what is the point of things coming down to or blaming one? The act or acts took several people to perform such a thing, right? So it's like, okay, everybody's upset about the leader or the boss or their manager or their supervisor or somebody else, right? And it comes down to normally one thing. But then when something big happens, it also the finger gets pointed at one thing, right? Or one person or one individual, right? It's not a huge thing, right? But it took several things to occur in order for it to happen. So who else is also in trouble due to their partaking in whatever actions took place? Think about it. It takes one domino to knock over the rest that create a piece of artwork. Hopefully. Now, the last point I want to make here. What does a dollar bill, belief, the Assassin's Creed symbol, and the Deathly Hallows symbol have in common? Is it the understanding of magic? I mean, let's look at Deathly Hallows in the back of a dollar bill and the pyramid and the circle that are already there with the box. And if you turn it sideways, wouldn't that be the wand? Interesting. Then people mention the Freemasons, and well, if you look at documentaries, the Freemason symbol is also a part of the Assassin's Creed symbol, which is weird and awesome at the same time because it's a great video game. But you have to believe in something, and on the back of a dollar bill, what's also stated amongst all the artwork and symbolism is "In God We Trust," but that requires belief. Not only in that, but the value that which you hold on a piece of fucking paper. So, do they matter? Does any of it matter? Because I've seen and I've experienced how far people are willing to go, right? To see what would happen. And then if something does happen, they go cry wolf. When will they learn? Anyways, this has been lesson 44 in class. Once again, this is also a tribute to anybody who's seen the TV show NCIS with Gibbs, so on and so forth. Not Gibbs, obviously the redhead from Suits that gave Mike a hard time, but he eventually passed. But the Gibbs that was a Marine, so on and so forth, and well, got raised by a lot of good people and then raised a lot of good people like Abby. And then, of course, she was on the team. She was one of the CSI people, if you guys seen the TV show. And then Ziva, she's gorgeous. And then, of course, you have DiNozzo. But I want to say thank you to the village that made me, right? Because most people would say, oh, I'm American. And I would just start laughing, right? because of the terminology and the way my brain works, I would say, are you North American, Central American, or South American? I'm American. Okay, I don't think you understood what I was asking, but okay. So you're from the USA. Got it, the United States of America. Got it. What if it said Providence, right? It would be a UPA or something like that. Or United American People, UAP. Um, Anyways, if you don't learn to think outside the box and people just want to fuel the atmosphere with certain things, I can only hope that Now You See Me, Now You Don't, along with a couple other things that are happening now, along with Sean Ryan's podcast on psychological operations, um, start to come out more. Not only to reset the mindset, but to create a shift in the psychology and sociology that's playing out right now, helping people not only see what's actually valuable, but learning that sometimes the best things in life come freely, like words or a deep breath. So until the next time, my friends, take care. God bless. Peace.